as was said at the time, and has repeatedly been said since, this was the biggest loss of life of Jewish life on a single day since the Holocaust. It marked a sea change in how Israel saw this conflict, saw the broader, longer conflict. Partly, this really does come home when you go to these commemorations, because it was the liberal half of Israel, if you like, that was targeted. Partly just because that's this Gaza pocket is where the kibbutzes are, which is a traditional home of the liberal left in Israel. The famous Supernova dance party, of course, had attracted lots of young liberal Israelis, with the motto of peace. Peace activists were killed by Hamas. So I was at the Supernova site this morning, where there was a very moving commemoration attended by hundreds of families of those who were killed. 364 young people, nearly all young people who attended that dance party, were killed on that morning. An extraordinary level of carnage for one event. No sign of any let up in the last few weeks. The idea of a ceasefire seems to have almost gone away altogether, partly because of the success of Israel's sudden decision to attack Hezbollah, and the success of that attack, the pages, the exploding walkie-talkies, the bombing raids that wiped out, most, if not all, of the senior political and military leadership. That's given the Israeli army a renewed vigor, and we're seeing that in Gaza as well. Determination to go after the remnants of Hamas. We don't know how much of Hamas remains, but the ground troops have gone back into Jabalia, for example, in the north of the Gaza Strip, even though they've already fought 3 battles there to clear Hamas out. So yes, still a lot of fighting to be done.
And again today, Richard, the Israeli leadership are saying again that warning is given before attacks take place, with the idea of minimizing innocent civilian casualties. And I know a lot of people wonder, hearing that, how it is possible to target terror targets, Hezbollah, Hamas personnel, having warned people that an attack is coming and that it's time to evacuate.
Yeah, I mean, there are different types of warning, of course. I mean, they're not going to warn if they're going to target for example, a Hezbollah leader or leadership meeting. They're not going to warn those leaders that an attack is coming. So in those cases, collateral damage is seen by the Israelis as necessary, and they don't have a clear figure of how many civilian deaths they think is acceptable to kill a particular rank of leader of Hamas or Hezbollah, but they certainly look at that calculation and decide what level of collateral damage, as we call it, as the famous euphemism, is acceptable. In other cases where they're going after arms supplies, yes, they do say residents of this village need to evacuate, because we're going to go after Hamas infrastructure, again, as they call it, in that village.
And of course, it's the anniversary of October the 7th. I mean, how is that being marked in Israel? Though I can imagine, I guess, that for many people, the anniversary of what happened on October the 7th may seem rather less significant than the daily reality of life since that day.
No, I think for Israelis, it's incredibly important. I mean, as was said at the time, and has repeatedly been said since, this was the biggest loss of life of Jewish life on a single day since the Holocaust. It marked a sea change in how Israel saw this conflict, saw the broader, longer conflict. Partly, this really does come home when you go to these commemorations, because it was the liberal half of Israel, if you like, that was targeted. Partly just because that's this Gaza pocket is where the kibbutzes are, which is a traditional home of the liberal left in Israel. The famous Supernova dance party, of course, had attracted lots of young liberal Israelis, with the motto of peace. Peace activists were killed by Hamas. So I was in the Supernova site this morning where there was a very moving commemoration attended by hundreds of families of those who were killed. 364 young people, most nearly all young people who attended that dance party were killed on that morning. An extraordinary level of carnage for one event. And it was very striking to me. There were survivors there who had, in between attending, what was effectively a trance party, had done had been called back into the army. They've all done their national service course, but they were reservists. They've been called back into the army. So this is like the hippie wing of Israeli society, all standing there telling me how they were determined to avenge the death of their friends, had found some sort of peace even in rejoining the army, putting the horrors of that day behind them in the service of their country. I think I don't know any other society where this sort of hippie rave culture coexists in the same people with this determination to fight for your country. It's quite a striking emblem of Israeli society now, I think.
Richard, really grateful for your insights as always, and for your updates on the situation. Richard is, of course, the Times Middle East correspondent, speaking from Tel Aviv. Now, I can welcome to the program Ilan Dalal, who is father of Guy Gilbert Dalal, who was kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival on that day. A good afternoon to you, Ilan.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. I can only imagine how difficult today must be for you. Can I ask you, first of all, what if anything, you know about your son, his whereabouts and his condition today?
Well, we saw a guy on a footage that was released by Hamas on the first day, where we saw him walking on 2 feet, healthy, into Gaza, led by a Hamas terrorist. And later on, we saw another footage of him inside a room in Gaza with other 4 other hostages, frightened and shocked. And since then, we got a sign of life about 5 months ago by the Israeli intelligence. I don't know exactly what kind of sign of life it is, but they say that he is alive.
Yeah.
And one of the hostages that were released 4 months ago from captivity by the IDF was Almog John, and he was with him and was kidnapped with him in the same time, and he told us about the first day of the kidnapping, things we didn't know.
Okay, so 4 months since any word, 5 months since evidence of life. It sounds absolutely awful. I'm so sorry for what you are going through. Can I just ask you then, just to take us back to the day that is being commemorated today, October the 7th last year. What happened on that day to your son?
On that day, my son went to the music festival with a few of his best childhood friends. They were very excited for this music festival. They waited months for it to come. And when the date came, there was just so exciting. They went there, and at about 6 o'clock in the morning, my older son, Guy, met with his younger brother at the festival. My both sons were in there, and they sent us a selfie at about 6:15 of both of them smiling, happy, and having a good time. And 15 minutes later, hell began, and missiles started to fly over their heads. And they wanted to come back home and went to their cars. And they all stuck in the traffic jam at the exit from the Nova Music Festival, where terrorists started to shoot and kill people inside their cars. Obviously, there was a big panic, and my sons ran to different direction. My older son, Gal, managed to run in the fields and escape for about 10 horrible hours until he was finally rescued by Israeli security forces. and was taken to Ofakim police station, and from there we took him home. My younger son, Guy, did not have this luck. He and his friends went to another direction, and we don't know exactly what happened, but after a few days we found out that two of his friends were brutally murdered, and the guy and his best friend were kidnapped into Gaza. As I told you before, one of the hostages that were released, Almog told us about this first day, and they were kidnapped together. They were hiding behind the same bush about an hour when they saw women got raped around them and people get hurt and killed. And finally, one of the terrorists spotted them, and luckily he didn't shoot them, and he decided to kidnap them and take them to Gaza. And we hope that they're still alive and well, as we saw in the first step, the first day.
Guy and one of his friends taken hostage, two friends dead. I can see on the video picture of you talking to us now, Ilan, you're wearing a T-shirt with your son's face on the front to keep alive the memory of your son. He was just 23 years old, wasn't he? Just an ordinary lad enjoying life, loved his guitar, loved his football. He was about to go on a trip to Japan before this happened.
Yes. He was actually 22 and 5 months when he was abducted.
Yeah.
He turned 23 4 months ago on May. He is a talented young man playing guitars, like computer games. He's a computer programmer, and he likes Maccabi Haifa. It's a football team in Israel, and of course he loves the Japanese culture and learned to speak and write Japanese, because actually right now he should have been in Japan in the big trip that he couldn't do because he was kidnapped.
Well, let us hope you can be reunited with your son again in the future.
We have to understand that all that we are experiencing is a part of an Iranian plan that has established this ring of fire around us and is being used by Iran as an axis that is coordinated by the Iranians from Tehran. And the fact that they have decided against their will to be directly involved in what's going on reflects the feeling that we have managed to cause a lot of damage to this ring of fire, to Hezbollah, to Hamas, to some extent also to the Houthis in Yemen. They are under pressure, and this is why they decided to get